Hello and welcome to our evening Dhamma session. Hope everything's working. I think the audio stream isn't working, but oh wait, sorry. Hello. Yes, now you can see me. Right. Good evening. So tonight's questions and answers. We have 11 questions. We had 12, but one was asking about something outside of our practice. So, and several of these some of them I'm not quite sure about. So we'll have to see as we go. Okay, so let's get right into it. Regarding anxiety, so the solution is to observe the thoughts first, then observe the feelings. So how does this solve anxiety when anxiety is caused by thoughts that are caused by deep-rooted beliefs? Okay, beliefs are what cause you to initiate actions or responses that you wouldn't habitually. A belief is something that creates habits, or creates habits, that instigates activity and leads to the cultivation of habit. So that's something different from actually from the actual habit of anxiety. But you're right to say that there are beliefs behind getting anxious. But the belief that you have this belief, I believe that I'm socially awkward. That's an odd way to phrase it. That you having the belief that you're socially awkward is somehow creating the state of being socially awkward. The belief that we would argue is responsible there is the belief in self, simply the belief in self, which informs or leads to the cultivation of the self-esteem and the concern for how you appear to others, right? So you walk into the party, there's a self-consciousness, right? But that comes from this idea that these experiences are possessed by an individual, the me, the I, right? And it may sound weird to say that because it seems quite obvious that it is me, it is I, but the me and the I are concepts in your mind, right? They're concepts that arise as experiences. When you conceive there's a me and there's an I, that's what creates it. The reality of the situation is that there's only seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. And so what meditation does is it creates the awareness of the reality of the experience and allows you to differentiate or sort of lower the validity of the self to its proper position, which is as a concept, meaning that you don't take it seriously. You walk into a party and you see things, you hear things, you smell things, you taste, you feel, and this concept of self isn't informing your reactions, right? You don't see someone and react thinking, I wonder how I look to them, it's more complex than that. But how social anxiety comes about, I mean, basically, what I'm saying is that the social anxiety arises out of the experience. It doesn't arise out of some abstract belief. And so it's really all about how you react to the experience. Your view that you have to address the beliefs rather than the experience, it belies the fact that habits are created based on experiences and based on your interpretation of experiences, right? When we get down to the mechanics of reality, we're talking about moments of experience and individual reactions, and that's what creates habits. Now, as I said, the beliefs are in the background, sort of pushing for a specific set of reactions. But it's not like the belief that I have social anxiety. The self-consciousness that comes from knowing that you were self-conscious before is just a part of the habit, of how you react to things. And so by changing that on a momentary level, rather than going back to this idea, I have social anxiety, that feeds the anxiety, you see the experience as it is, and you start to cultivate a new habit, the habit of experiencing things objectively. And so I mean, I don't really know how to address your concern directly, because it's kind of an abstract. You have this view that your views are informing or creating the problem. And I would argue that I guess I would say just try and give it a chance, and you'll find that if you are mindful, that it works. And the reason why it works is because it's dealing with the nitty-gritty, the mechanics, the momentary reality that is experience. And if you do that, you don't have to worry about all these ideas of what is causing it and what is to blame and so on. The views that you'll overcome are views of self, which are certainly contributing to it. I have two questions. The first one is, I can observe when a thought arises and when an emotion arises, but where is the liking or disliking? Now, I don't understand this question. Do you mean that you don't you don't recognize anything? Or, oh, now I dislike this. Like, have you never experienced a state where you were able to recognize it as liking or disliking? If so, then don't note it, until your mind gets clear enough so that you can see it. And I wouldn't worry about trying to catch liking or disliking until you actually experience a form of it. There's different sorts of liking and disliking. You can be angry, you can be frustrated, you can be bored. All of these are experiences that we have. Now, you can't note them directly, or you can't experience them, you can't be mindful of them directly, because there's delusion involved with these sorts of states. But once you've realized that, hey, I was, there, I just like that, then you just say liking. The point being, you're trying to just remind yourself, okay, it was liking, it wasn't me, it wasn't mine, it wasn't good, it wasn't bad. Trying to cut off the chain of reaction. Because when you like something, you react to that. You say, I gotta have it. Or when you dislike something, you say, I've gotta find some way to remove it or escape it, or so on. And mindfulness changes that. When you're mindful, okay, I like it, that was it. It's done. With respect to... Oh, there was two questions there, weren't there? I'm sorry. Oh, do I find the other question? What was the other question? Here we are. The second question, if all phenomena only appear as seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, seeing... I got them way out of order, but that's okay. There's no proper. Seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, and thinking. Where does insight arise? Okay, so thinking is is maybe too specific. The sixth one is mental activity. And mental activity also relates to the other five. So every time you see something, there's also, of course, mental activity associated with it. So the sixth is special. It's not like there's six and they're equal, or they have the same nature. Mental activity is special because it relates. And the Abhidhamma deals with this. If you study the Abhidhamma, it acknowledges that the sixth sense is more complex and relates to the other five. So in the moment of seeing, there's also mental activity. But there is for example, insight, the experience of insight, or experience of any ordinary thought as well. And that's a sort of a sixth sense. It's a type of experience. I mean, those six are just referring to the types of things that exist from a point of view of experience. It's not, it just means that anything like insight is the sixth sense. It's mental. But the word thought is probably, as I said, too specific. Or too specific maybe. Okay, this person is asking for help, and these are long questions. It's impressive that you're writing out these long questions. Not exactly, well, no, it's not bad. Okay, but this one is all about how you have trouble with self-control, it's destroyed your life, tried brute force, and then you get into, I want to be able to handle anything, to be able to endure any pain or discomfort. Okay, well that's I think a good ambition. But right away I start to say, well, you have to be careful about wanting, because it's barking up, or it's the wrong tool for the task. I mean, having a view that being able to handle anything and being able to endure pain and discomfort, that's I think it's noble to acknowledge the benefit of that. But when to want it and to have this drive to attain it can be quite dangerous and counterproductive. It's an obsession with a goal. And that's really, in general, a very important thing to understand. Obsession with goals, even good goals, is counterproductive. It's a cause for stress and suffering. Meditation isn't so much about goals, and I keep harping on this because people get so obsessed with goals that they just make themselves sick and make it harder for them to obtain those goals. So meditation is very much about the process. It's about doing the right thing. And it goes like this: if you do the right thing, good results come, and the right results come. And that's important. What I mean by that is they might not be the results that you want or the results that you expect, but they're the results that you need, and they're the results that are right because they come from honest and objective insight, whereas our ideas of how things should be and what we should want and so on are skewed, are of necessity imperfect, because they're based on they lack the knowledge of the experiential knowledge of the goal, the familiarity with the goal. Obviously, because they're our goal, we haven't attained them. Until you attain the goals, your understanding of them is imperfect. Like Nibbana, for example. How can you understand that if you've never experienced it? How can you understand anything if you've never experienced it? So, I would be very shy to, or be very alert to your desires and ambitions. So, and then you get into, I want to have this strength. I'm tired of living so far below my potential due to my inability to handle discomfort. So, again, these are the problem. This being tired, which is a disliking, which is an aversion, which is a reaction, is what you should be working on. So if you haven't read my booklet, I recommend you do so, and try to use it to focus not on your goals, but on these experiences that you're describing to me, which is usually the case. A meditator complains that they can't meditate or they can't succeed because of X, Y, and Z, when in fact X, Y, and Z are what they should be meditating on. So always remember that. Any complaint you have or any concern you have, that's where what should be your object of meditation. What karma might lead to mental illness from a Buddhist perspective? I've been born with bipolar disorder, and sometimes I ask myself. So I read this and I was thinking about it. I mean, the first red flag is, oh no, never ask what did I do to deserve X, Y, or Z, because it's very complicated and very hard to understand. But I would offer a general understanding that if our mind is in a specific state, probably very much like the state your mind is in now, well, maybe that's not fair. If you had been cultivating similar states, right, like extremes of emotion, not like this, because bipolar is understood to be very much organic, right? It has a lot to do with the makeup of the brain. But if you were developing those, there's this idea that, actually it's just my idea, I don't have these specifics from the text, but based on what I've read and what I've understood, the 9 months or so that you're in the womb are going to be influential. How the mind massages and you know, or not massages, but strangles the brain, and I would say potentially warps the brain as it's developing in the fetus. I would guess, because that's the thing. If you, I took a science course once that talks about malnutrition. If a fetus is malnourished, it actually changes the fetus. I mean, it's permanently detrimental. Whereas after the fetus is born, and someone can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but in humans, if I understand correctly, after the fetus is born, malnutrition will not, generally speaking, or it's not to the same degree or something, it's not permanent in the same way, but malnutrition for the fetus is dangerous. And so by the same token, mental activity, I would bet that a lot of these so-called organic mental illnesses are, from a Buddhist perspective, caused by the nature of the mind that is inhabiting or is you know, creating, or not creating, but coming together with the fetus as it is formed. I would bet. You know, that seems to be the most adequate explanation. Of course, scientists are saying, what? But they don't believe in rebirth anyway, so. I'm having a real hard time in philosophy class, studying Aristotle now, and I'm asking all these questions, and I'm not sure what the problem is, but I think the problem is I'm very critical of these guys. I think I figured it out, that I'm asking a lot of questions about that relate to my Buddhist understanding, and I realize I'm not just trying to understand these things, I'm actually critical of Aristotle, because it's very interesting. I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, Aristotle is the kind of, from what I understand, this kind of Hindu goal of living a good life perpetually, you know, with no idea of trying to escape that. It's just, you know, find a way to live and live and be reborn again and again. And actually, he doesn't believe in rebirth, I don't think, but you pass it on to your children and on and on and on. Anyway, not at all related here. Why did I get into that? I don't remember. Yeah, okay, and here's a perennial question about can't we just be aware and not label them mentally? And many of you have heard me give this answer many, many times. You don't need to, it's not a problem. You don't feel bad that you're asking this. It's of course one that keeps being asked. It's fine. It's a good question. And the answer is yes, you can. We tend to, or my argument is that it's inferior. Now that's of course debatable, and there are people who would curse me up and down for well, would disagree with me on that. Curse me. Buddhists don't curse each other. They would disagree with me, but that's fine. So what I would say in my defense is that it's a type of mantra meditation. Why do you use a mantra at all? It's a good question to ask, and I think it's a valid question that you have to admit. You have to admit that at least that this sort of idea has an ancient and almost eternal backing. It's the kind of every culture, any society or any group of people who have really cultivated strong meditation tend to rely upon mantras, because words are powerful. Words encapsulate ideas, and so the use of the word creates what we call mindfulness or sati. And that can be used to focus on a specific object, or in our case, it can be used to focus on experiential objects. So, can you? Yes, you can. Should you? I would argue no. I would argue that you should use the mantra. Now, when you find your problem, as you say, is that you find your thinking rising and falling, you feel that you're meditating on the words more than the sensation. And this is what Mahasi Sayadaw is trying to say, I'm quite sure, in the passage that's been mistranslated and misinterpreted and given an interpretive translation to say that you shouldn't use the words or they drop away after a while. But what he says is that the concepts drop away. Yes, in the beginning, the words get in the way and the concepts of foot get in the way and that sort of thing. But if you do it enough, you begin to you get better at it, and you begin to only experience the actual experiences, or only observe, only become aware of the experiences. But in us, that's the one side of it. Okay, so the one side is that it will get better. You will get more proficient at it. But, and I think I've said this several times as well, to an extent, the mantra is meant to inhibit your experience of the experience. It's meant to inhibit the ordinary, the type of experience or the type of interaction with experience that we're used to. We're used to reacting. We're used to go with the flow. We're used to going with the flow. To not be too cliche, but we're used to just going with it. And so part of what you're experiencing, I would argue, is most likely this disruption. That meditation is disruptive, mindfulness is disruptive. It's changing, and it's changing in a fairly abrupt manner. Your familiar and comfortable way of reacting to experiences. Okay, so that takes some time. Again, this is where the getting used to it, getting better at it comes in. But the feeling that it's disruptive, or it's getting in the way, is important, because we want to try to create a simple and the simplest possible experience, a reaction to an experience, or experience of an object, right? Where we don't make more of it than it is. And that requires quite a bit of nivarana, as the Buddha said. Sati is a hindrance. It has to prevent, it has to protect the object, protect the experience. Let it only be seeing. Ditte ditta matang bhavisati. Let seeing just be seeing. It's not easy to do. So I'd be patient with it, and part of you can try to be mindful of the discomfort and the disconcerting feeling, the feeling of disconcert, and that should help. Try and be mindful of that. If you're confused or unsure, say confused, unsure. If you doubt the practice, say doubting. That's always the most fun. I'm not sure if this practice is any good. Well, say to yourself, doubting, because you'll see the doubting disappears, and then you're much more able to practice. I'm wondering whether to give people advice on when to stay silent. One of my family members hunts. Okay, so this, I thought about this, and I think it depends on your relationship, and it certainly has to be based on mindfulness to be proper. And it has to be done, well, it has to be done mindfully. It has to come out of mindfulness. So I think what that means is, don't be afraid to say something, but don't let it be because you want to help the person, right? So it should really, more often than not, come just as a matter of fact. So it would be if the person is talking about hunting, you could express your and again, it depends on your relationship. You know, is this the kind of thing that you would say? It's like if someone says, boy, I like liver steak or something, you could say, oh, I don't like liver steak at all. And that would be an ordinary conversation. So what I mean to say is, if it comes up ordinarily where the person says, oh, I'm thinking about going hunting this weekend, then you could say something like, I don't believe in I don't hunt because I think killing is wrong, something like that. Which is heavy. It's a heavy thing to say, but I don't think it's wrong to say that. I mean, I get the point. Is your concern is that, is it wrong to keep quiet? And I think it can be wrong if you're afraid to offend someone, right? That fear is unwholesome, right? Fear is unwholesome. So it should be natural. Where, I mean, you have to think, if I wasn't Buddhist, would I respond to this? Like, would I have said, oh yeah, maybe I'll go hunting with you? Whereas now you would say, yeah, I'm not really into hunting myself, just as a matter of fact, you know, because that keeps the normalcy of the situation. It's not because it helps that person. Right? So this is the tricky spot, is even the Buddha wasn't really into helping so much as he was just doing what came naturally. You know, having been invited to teach, yes, he was teaching, but it was much more, oh, now this person needs to hear this, so I'll tell them this. Meaning that it shouldn't be this desire to help the person. This is something you should be mindful of. And when it does come out, it should just be naturally. Like, well, now it's my turn to say something, or this is the time where I would normally say something. So what I say is, yeah, hunting is not for me. You know, I've given up hunting. I've given up killing, because as a Buddhist, that kind of. If they don't like it, they don't like it. I mean, the point is to be natural, because if you be religious about it and say, oh, you know how evil that is? You know, did you know that you're going to hell? Right? Really, what's it to you? That sort of thing it's not the sort of thing an ordinary person says to another person. It's not the sort of thing that's natural part of conversation. It's clear that that person is a religious zealot and out to save others, right? It was good intentions, but with still this obsession, this religious obsession and it's, you know, it's I think it speaks to this idea of religious obsession that leads to missionarism and leads to, you know, people to walk up to me on the street and try to convert me. It's sort of this, I think, lack of, well, there's religious texts that encourage it, but there's deeper is this lack of self assurance in one's own practice that leads one to have to try to convince others. Because maybe if other people believe it, then it'll reassure me that what I'm doing is right. You know? This, because we have this angst inside us, this urgency about it. Whereas a person who is comfortable in it is, yeah, they might look at someone else who's hunting and think, But the Buddha just smiled sometimes when he saw what other people were all involved in. And this minister came to him and asked him, because the king had sent him and said, "Oh, I'm going to go and kill all these people. Will I succeed? I'm going to go and attack this other country. Basically, I'm going to go and wage war. Will I succeed?" And the Buddha didn't say anything about how war is wrong, but he talked about how this other society had followed his advice, and thereby they would most likely prosper in the future. Right? He didn't even say, "What are you coming to me with? War is wrong. I'm a Buddhist." He didn't even say that. So it seems it's quite clear that it's not about trying to change other people. It's about doing the right thing at the right time, saying the right thing at the right time, and keeping pure and clear in your intentions and in your actions and in your speech. Because the best results come from that. I mean, practically speaking, what happens then is good things come, and people start to learn naturally about who you are and about what you follow, and they learn about Buddhism naturally, not based on proselytizing or pushing it on others. It just doesn't come out. It doesn't turn out well. Okay, this one, I'm not sure what this question doesn't. You basically mindful in your dreams. When you dream, you see something, you say seeing, but you're not physically there. So what should I do? I don't see what the problem is. I don't see that you have to do anything. It's a dream. So when you wake up, you can say knowing, or how you feel about it. Note that as well. That's all I would say. Don't worry. There's nothing that needs to be done about that. Okay, I've been meditating. I find often mindfulness is very intense. Okay, that's an interpretation, kind of. So the question is, what are you actually experiencing? Something that you interpret as being intense. It's probably a feeling or a sense, right? Which is just a feeling. So if you feel stressed or maybe tired afterwards, or no, actually during, if you feel tense, it would be some kind of tension. You should say feeling, or tense. That's not mindfulness. That's something that you're not being mindful of, that you should be mindful of. Be mindful of that tension, or whatever it is that's making you think it's intense. Because intense is your reaction. We want to change that, and instead of saying, "Boy, this is intense," we want to say, "This is this. It is what it is, whatever that is." So figure out what that is. Here's a question that I think the English is not so good because I just don't get it. There's in one of your videos you talk about the book and say something about a mantra, ? I don't get that. Is that do you talk about the book and say something about a mantra? And then there's a statement, to say to help in mindfulness. Can you talk a little bit more about this? I don't know what I'd be talking about. So I have videos that I talk about the book, a book, another book. The book, that's really the only one. I would start there. There's a couple of other books that I've sort of written, but I wouldn't worry about them. Say something about a mantra. So the book talks about a mantra. It's just a word I use to try and... I'm trying to legitimize it, this practice, and take away this sort of stigma that's associated with noting, as it's called. I don't use noting so much. I tell people to say to themselves, because I want to be explicit about it. Did you say to yourself, seeing, pain, and so on? I don't use noting because it's too clinical and kind of... it's weird, but I want to be clear and make it practical. Yes, I actually expect you to say to yourself, seeing. Make it simple, and let's not dance around it. It's not a mantra in the sense that you're mindlessly reciting this. I think I've had people react poorly or negatively to my use of the word mantra, and I think it's maybe a reason why it's not been adopted previously, is because we think of a mantra as something that you mindlessly repeat. So if it was pain, you would say pain, 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 without any relation to the object. But that's not how mantras are used. That's not how they should be used, or how they ever really have been used. If you read the texts, clearly it's mantra meditation, but mantra is a phrase that is meant to mean something. It's meant to relate to some reality or a concept, but in this case, reality. So it's still a mantra. Maybe it's not. I don't know. It's just a word. But I wanted to legitimize the practice and say, hey, look, this is what this is something ancient. It's not something new or artificial. I mean, it is artificial. Meditation is an artifice, but it's not anything weird anyway. Hopefully that helps. The talk that Sita Gusayada, oh no, I'm not going to answer this, sorry. I have no idea who that is, and it doesn't relate to our meditation, so. Yeah, there's monks. It's maybe a cop-out on my part, because I should have things to say about what monks say. Now let me think about it. I'd rather keep this meditative, because we have meditators here who are trying to practice, and they would like to listen to these questions as well. So, my question is, I am meditating for 7 to 8 months. I'm seeing that when I'm happy, I'm unable to be mindful. Happiness controls me. Catch it up. Is happiness wrong? Happiness is not wrong, but anytime you're not mindful, that's wrong. So try and be mindful of the happiness. You say you're unable, well, train. Become able. Learn how to be able. It just takes practice. And I appreciate you've been doing it for so long. It's really good to see your interest in this, enthusiasm. Keep it up. Here's a question about Goenka. Problem practicing Mahasi. When I note my mind is even more excited, well then you'd note excited. We're not trying, and I have a feeling that I find no peace. We're not trying to find peace, we're trying to be mindful. Peace will come by itself. What you're trying to see, look at the Four Noble Truths. The first Noble Truth is that one should fully understand suffering. There's nothing in there about, hey, one should practice to find peace. I mean, that's the third Noble Truth. It's true. But how do you do it? It's not, how do you attain peace? You attain peace by understanding suffering, by thoroughly understanding suffering. It's painful, it's stressful. You have to see what you're doing wrong, and that's what this is showing you. Mahasi meditation, meditation, in my opinion, that works, should disturb you, should pull you out of your comfort zone, force you to squirm, It should be thoroughly unpleasant in the beginning. But it's unpleasant in the fact that your mind is not able to follow after its ordinary habits. In that you're forcing your mind to confront experiences that you normally don't want to confront. Mostly we don't confront any experiences. A good experience, we like it. A bad experience, we dislike it. That's not confronting. That's a different kind of relating to it. It's a reaction. Confronting that's basically, if you want to understand why it's uncomfortable, it's because we're confronting. And anytime you confront anything, it's uncomfortable. But most especially, specifically when you confront reality, you realize that reality is not this. It's not what we thought it was. The things that we thought were stable are unstable. The things that we thought were satisfying are unsatisfying. The things that we thought were ours, were under our control, or had some lasting stability to them, don't have any of that. So no, I don't recommend any other technique but this one. And I mean, I hope that you can persist, but if you go somewhere else, that's fine too. I started practicing Vipassana 2 years ago, but I could not maintain my continuity. Again with a mantra. Okay, I started to repeat a mantra in my mind. My mind can focus very easily. But we are said not to repeat any mantra or visualize any object. I mean, those are all valid. That sounds like valid practice to me. Whoever told you that, I think, is misled, misguided. Mantra meditation is completely valid. It's probably the oldest, most valid meditation there is. I would just recommend not, I don't recommend, no, I mean, I would encourage you to consider trying to use the mantra for reality, that's all, and so you read my booklet and get into that if you like. But meditating on a concept, you can see it's really good for concentration, and it's very pure. It's hard to go wrong if you just have a mantra. I mean, it's harder to go wrong than just watching and looking, right? What's that? Where's the rudder, the thing that keeps you straight, keeps you on course? I would say mindfulness is like this rudder. The mantra is like a rudder. I'm thinking about ordaining. Recommend a monastery that follows your method of noting. Well, there's one in Sri Lanka. You could go to my monastery in Thailand, but I'm not so keen on Thailand. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go there. Wat Rampung might be nice in Chiang Mai. I don't know. If I had a monastery, you could come here. I don't. I'm just waiting for my students to build me a monastery. Maybe someday. When you use pain, happy, and calm in your meditation instruction, are these your equivalent for painful, pleasant, and neutral? Yes. I mean, yes. Yes. When you use effort, knowledge, and acknowledgement in your meditation instructions for 3 fundamental qualities, are these your equivalents for atapi, sampajano, and satima? Yes. Yes. So I think those are simple questions trying to relate my sort of off-the-cuff explanations. I was trying to be sort of easy to understand, so it does kind of mask the underlying orthodox teachings. But yeah, you can see that I am following to some extent, or hopefully to a main extent, the Satipatthana Sutta in that text. Okay, that was all the questions. That was nice. Thank you for all the questions, everyone. Keep them coming. If you have them, don't just try to think up questions. If you do that, problem. You're on the wrong path. If you have no questions, good for you. Someone with no questions is either a fool or is on the right path. Fool means they're very much on the wrong path, because it's possible to be overconfident. Be careful, don't be overconfident. But don't worry if you don't have questions. It's often a very good sign, because it means that you're clear about what you have to do. It's not where wisdom comes from. Wisdom doesn't come from asking questions. Knowledge comes from asking questions. What can support you to cultivate wisdom? So it's important, if you have questions, to ask them. But don't think of it as a substitute or as an end in and of itself. The knowledge you get from me is not going to enlighten you. Only your own practice of the right path is going to enlighten you. So those are the questions for tonight. That's the Dhamma for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a good night.